He said I was too emotional to lead the company I built. But hours later, his new girl learned the truth he'd spent years burying beneath our success. Have you ever trusted someone so much that you ignored the cracks right in front of you? Comment below. I'd love to know if you've ever faced a betrayal that taught you to see differently. The city shimmered below her office window, glass towers glinting like polished lies. Amara Blake stood before the skyline she'd once dreamed of conquering. The same skyline that now felt like it was staring back at her, cold, judgmental, indifferent. A thin line of sunlight cut across the boardroom table, lighting up a stack of reports she'd spent all night perfecting. The numbers were beautiful. Record profits, global expansion, a new contract in Singapore. Every detail a testament to her mind, her strategy, her sacrifice. But as the executives filed into the room, she felt it, that hollow shift in the air. The polite smiles, the quick glances toward Ethan, the tension just beneath the corporate polish. Her husband sat at the other end of the table, perfectly composed in his tailored charcoal suit. Ethan Blake had always been the face of Blake Innovations, charming, photogenic, the visionary. Amara was the heart and brain, but hearts were easier to erase from headlines. He caught her watching him and gave that half smile she used to find irresistible. It didn't reach his eyes anymore. When he finally spoke, his tone carried the smooth, rehearsed authority of a man about to do something cruel and call it strategy. Before we begin, I'd like to address a leadership concern, he said, tapping his pen twice against the table. A murmur rippled through the room. Amara felt her spine stiffen. What concern? Ethan didn't look at her. Not yet. After discussions with several board members, we believe the company needs fresh energy, a stronger creative lead to take us through our next growth phase. Her pulse slowed, then thundered. A stronger lead? She repeated softly. Meaning what exactly, Ethan? He turned then, eyes cool. Meaning it's time for you to step back. The words landed with surgical precision. For a moment, Amara couldn't breathe. The sound of the air conditioner roared in her ears. Across the table, she saw her assistant's face pale. One of the interns looked down awkwardly, and then she saw her. Lena Torres, bright-eyed, 20-something, the new marketing hire Ethan had insisted on bringing personally on board. She sat near the end of the table, fidgeting with a pen, avoiding Amara's gaze. Something inside Amara twisted. Step back, she echoed. Ethan, this company is my life. Our life. We built it together. His jaw flexed. I'm aware of your contribution, Amara. But lately you've seemed emotionally reactive, overattached to the past. Investors are concerned. She laughed, incredulous. Emotionally reactive? I've been keeping this company alive while you... She stopped herself, breath catching. The silence thickened. She could feel everyone watching. He leaned forward. Let's not do this here. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Then where do you want to do it, Ethan? Because it seems like you've already decided. Lena looked up then, her eyes flicking between them like a trapped bird. Ethan closed a folder in front of him. You're on temporary leave, effective immediately. HR will finalize the paperwork. It's not personal. It was the kind of phrase only people without hearts ever said. Amara rose slowly, every movement deliberate, fighting the tremor in her hands. Not personal, she whispered. You're firing your wife, Ethan, from the company she built. A long silence followed. Then, with the faintest trace of irritation, Ethan said, Please don't make a scene. She froze, that phrase again. Always the same tone, the same quiet condescension, the same warning. The one he used whenever she caught him lying, or drinking too much, or hiding late-night texts. She'd once mistaken that tone for patience. Now she knew better. Without another word, she gathered her things, turned, and walked out. Her heels clicked against the marble like gunshots. Each step echoed with disbelief. The company's employees watched silently as she passed. Pity in some eyes, guilt in others, fear in most. No one dared speak. When she reached the elevator, Her reflection stared back at her in the chrome doors, composed, elegant but hollow. A woman who'd just been erased by the man she'd built an empire with. As the doors closed, she whispered under her breath, "It's not over." The drive home was a blur of headlights and noise. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Reporters already catching the scent of scandal. Colleagues texting variations of, "I'm so sorry." One unread message from Ethan sat at the top of her screen. "Let's talk tonight. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Her grip tightened on the wheel. Harder, as if betrayal had an acceptable difficulty setting. She drove without destination until the sky turned violet. When she finally parked, she didn't realize she'd stopped outside their penthouse. Or maybe some part of her had always meant to return. Inside, everything was too quiet. The penthouse smelled faintly of his cologne, cedar, and something sharper underneath. The walls, lined with awards, mockingly gleamed under dim lighting. Their wedding photo still hung over the piano. She stared at it for a long time, tracing the memory of who they were before power poisoned everything. The sound of a glass clinking broke her trance. Ethan stood by the bar, whiskey in hand, his posture too casual for the storm he'd just unleashed. "Amara," he said softly, "I didn't want it to happen like that." She walked toward him slowly, every step steady. "Then how did you want it to happen, Ethan? Over dinner? A text? It's business," he said, pouring another drink. "You're taking it too personally." Her laugh came out hollow. "You're unbelievable. I'm trying to save what we built." "No," she said quietly. "You're trying to own it alone." That made him look up. There it was, the flicker of guilt, gone as quickly as it came. "Amara," he said, tone softening, "you're brilliant, but you don't see the optics. You've been too." She cut him off, stepping closer until she could smell the liquor on his breath. "Too what? Too visible? Too strong? Too unwilling to let you rewrite history." He looked away, jaw tight. "You're tired. Maybe take some time. Travel. Find yourself again." Her heart ached, not from what he said, but from how easily he said it. For the first time, she saw him clearly. The ambition that once attracted her now looked like hunger, the kind that devoured everything in its path, including love. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered, "if that's what you want." But as she turned to leave, her voice dropped to a whisper that made him pause. "You've forgotten one thing, Ethan." He frowned. "What's that?" Amara met his eyes, steady, cold, unflinching. "You might have taken the company, but you'll never understand how it works. If you were in Amara's place, would you fight back now, or wait until the truth revealed itself? Comment your instinct below. I'm reading them all." The night didn't end. It just changed shape, from confrontation to silence, from words to the kind of stillness that gnaws at you long after the echoes fade. Amara sat alone in her car, the engine idling, rain streaking across the windshield like cracks in glass. She watched the penthouse balcony where Ethan stood, phone to his ear, pacing. She couldn't hear his voice, but she didn't need to. She already knew who he was talking to. She waited a long time before starting the car again. She didn't drive home. She didn't even know where home was anymore. Instead, she found herself parked in front of a familiar cafe, Verve, the tiny hole in the wall where she and Ethan had sketched their first product idea on a napkin 9 years ago. The owner, a gray-haired woman named Ruth, looked up in surprise as Amara walked in, drenched from the rain. "Sweetheart," Ruth said softly, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," Amara murmured, taking her usual corner seat. She ordered her old drink, black coffee, 2 sugars, but it didn't taste right anymore. Nothing did. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. "We need to be civil about this, Amara. The board can't see conflict. It affects valuation." She stared at it, then typed her reply slowly. "Don't worry. You've already taught me how to disappear." She didn't send it. She deleted it, finished her coffee, and opened her laptop instead. Her fingers moved with mechanical precision, typing commands only she could understand. Behind the facade of Blake Innovations Public Systems was a buried architecture. Her architecture. She had built it line by line, night by night, every function protected under an encrypted protocol called Nemesis, a silent guardian meant to activate only under threat. And now, that threat had a face. A few keystrokes later, the program came alive, its coded pulse running deep through the company's veins. She didn't want revenge. Not yet. She wanted truth. And truth required patience. When she finally closed the laptop, her reflection stared back from the dark screen, weary but alive. The next morning, Amara woke in a small apartment she hadn't seen in years. Her first one, from before the company took off. The walls were bare except for a single-framed quote her mother had given her. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to remember who you are. She stood in front of the mirror, tying her hair back, and whispered to her reflection, "Maybe this is where I start remembering." She spent the morning calling silent contacts, lawyers, old investors, and accountants she trusted from the early days. Nothing overt, nothing traceable. Just gentle ripples in still water. When she finally checked the news, her stomach turned. Headline: Blake Innovations announces visionary new ERA under Ethan Blake and executive partner Lena Torres. Partner. The word hung like acid. Scrolling down, she saw photos. Ethan smiling for the cameras, hand resting lightly on Lena's shoulder. Lena, trying to hide her discomfort behind practiced poise. The caption called them the dynamic duo redefining tech leadership. Her heart clenched, but not out of jealousy, out of disbelief. That's how easy it was for him to rewrite the story. That's how easy it was to erase her. Lena Torres didn't sleep that night either. Her apartment still smelled of new paint and roses. Ethan had sent them, a congratulatory gesture that felt both intoxicating and wrong. She'd told herself what everyone tells themselves when they fall for someone already taken. It's different this time. But the silence between his messages told her it wasn't. She stood before her mirror, touching the diamond bracelet he'd given her, the same one Amara had worn in their old press photos. She didn't know that yet, but she would. When she arrived at the office the next morning, everything felt different. The staff were polite, but their smiles carried something else. The pity reserved for someone who didn't yet realize she was standing in a storm. Ethan greeted her warmly, as always. "You ready for the media run?" She nodded, pretending confidence. "Of course." He placed a hand on her back as they walked toward the cameras. It looked affectionate. It wasn't. His grip was just tight enough to remind her who was in control. The lights flashed. Questions flew. Ethan answered them all, effortlessly charming. When one reporter asked about Amara's departure, he smiled like a man spinning a fairy tale. "Amara's chosen to take time off," he said. "She's been incredible, but leadership transitions are part of growth." Lena's throat tightened. The lie was smooth, practiced, the kind of lie you tell when you've said it many times before. Later, as she sat at her new desk, Amara's old desk, she opened one of the folders Ethan had left for her. Inside were project files, legal drafts, and a small sticky note in Amara's handwriting. "Never forget who you were before this place taught you what it cost to dream." Lena stared at it for a long time, the words cutting through her chest like glass. She didn't know why she didn't throw it away. Instead, she slid it quietly into her bag. That evening, Amara sat on her balcony with a cup of tea, scrolling through public comments under the announcement article. Half the internet praised Ethan's strategic evolution. The other half wondered where she'd gone. Her assistant, Mia, called. "Are you okay?" Amara smiled faintly. "Define okay. Do you want me to leak what really happened?" Mia asked. "The investors, the transfer? You've got receipts, Amara." She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not yet. Let him think he's safe." Mia exhaled. "You sound too calm." "Calm isn't peace," Amara said quietly. "It's calculation." When she hung up, she looked out at the city, her city, glowing beneath her like circuitry. She thought of Lena. The girl looked too much like who Amara used to be. Hopeful, ambitious, unaware of how fast Ethan could turn admiration into weaponry. She didn't hate her. Not yet. She pitted her. Because when the truth surfaced, and it always did, Lena would be the one drowning first. And Ethan wouldn't save her. Have you ever watched someone steal what you built and realized revenge wasn't about destroying them, but about rebuilding yourself? Tell me how you handled it. I want to hear your story. The morning after the announcement, Amara's world became a headline. Tech power couple split. Amara Blake ousted from Blake Innovations. New CEO Ethan Blake names rising star Lena Torres as executive partner. The queen has fallen, but for how long? The words bled across her phone screen, shared thousands of times before she'd even brushed her hair. The photograph chosen by the press made it worse. A shot of Ethan and Lena at the company gala, smiling beneath chandeliers, his hand resting on Lena's waist like it belonged there. Amara's fingers trembled as she scrolled through the article. Each paragraph felt like a surgical extraction of her dignity, neatly packaged for public consumption. Sources close to the couple say Amara had become emotionally erratic in recent months, prompting the board to question her leadership stability. Emotionally erratic. The phrase glowed in bold. Her throat burned. That word, emotional, had been Ethan's favorite weapon. A word that stripped power from brilliance, reason from women like her. She put the phone down and stared out the window. Morning sunlight spilled across her apartment, highlighting unopened boxes. A life paused mid-collapse. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. A reminder that the world kept moving, indifferent to personal ruin. Her laptop pinged. A message from Mia. MIA. They're dragging you online. But also, there's something weird. Lena posted a statement. You need to read it. Amara clicked the link. Lena's post sat at the top of her feed, polished but uneasy. Honored to step into this new chapter with Blake Innovations. Humbled by Ethan's faith in me. Deeply grateful to Amara Blake for paving the way for women like me in tech. Your legacy inspires me. The comments section was chaos. Half the world worshipped her. The other half accused her of betrayal. Amara stared at the words, your legacy inspires me. There was a softness in them, guilt maybe, or fear. For a fleeting second, Amara almost pitted her again. Almost. At the same time, across town, Lena sat in her new corner office, staring at the same post. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Journalists requesting interviews, brands offering partnerships. She should have been elated. But the comments, those venomous, endless comments, sliced through the high. Homewrecker. You'll never be her. Enjoy it while it lasts. She locked her phone and exhaled shakily. Her assistant, a nervous intern, peeked in. Miss Torres? Ethan wants you in his office. Lena smoothed her blouse, forced a smile, and walked down the hall. Ethan was on a call when she entered, his tone clipped and agitated. No, I don't care what the board says. Optics are temporary. Results are permanent. When he hung up, he turned that same dazzling smile toward her. You look tense. Lena hesitated. People online are saying things. About Amara. About me. He shrugged. Ignore them. You'll learn fast. People only hate you when you matter. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe him. But his voice held that same undertone it always did. Reassurance laced with quiet control. Still, she said softly, maybe we should make a statement? Something about respecting Amara's contribution. His jaw tightened. She had her time. Don't romanticize the past. You're the future now. Lena forced a smile. Of course. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Besides, the internet will move on once we announce the new product launch. That's where I need your focus. The way he said need made her stomach knot. Meanwhile, Amara sat in her small apartment, phone still buzzing with alerts. Her old colleagues, journalists, even friends who hadn't texted in years were reaching out. Some with sympathy, some with curiosity, others with veiled opportunism. But one message made her pause. It was from a private, unknown number. They've started cleaning the servers. He's erasing traces of your code. You didn't hear this from me. Her heart skipped. The sender was someone inside Blake Innovations, someone who knew the system. Her code wasn't just data. It was her soul in binary. The algorithms she'd spent years perfecting, the security frameworks that made their company untouchable. And Ethan was dismantling it. She opened her laptop and accessed the Nemesis architecture again. The system pulsed, showing dozens of new edits and deletions under Ethan's ID. Her breath caught. He wasn't just erasing her name, he was rewriting history. Hours later, Lena walked past Ethan's office and stopped. The door was slightly open. His voice was low but sharp. "Delete every trace of her commits," he was saying to the head of IT. "If any journalist digs into old records, they'll see my name on the core architecture. I don't care what it takes." Lena froze. The head of IT hesitated. "Sir, those frameworks are hers. You can't." Ethan's tone turned icy. "Do it, or find another job." The man fell silent. Lena's pulse raced. She stepped back quietly, heart pounding. She knew the corporate world could be brutal, but this wasn't ambition. This was theft. She returned to her desk, trying to steady her breath. Amara's note from the folder replayed in her head. "Never forget who you were before this place taught you what it costs to dream." Suddenly, the words didn't sound poetic. They sounded prophetic. That night, Amara received another message from the anonymous number. "Check folder, internal_backup_13. You want to see what he's doing." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Within seconds, her screen filled with encrypted records, emails, invoices, and internal reports linking Ethan to offshore accounts and misused investor funds. Her stomach turned cold. It wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. And if he was caught, he'd drag her name down with him, because her signature was still on half the old contracts. Her mind spun. Years of love, loyalty, and work condensed into this. A ticking time bomb waiting to explode. She closed her laptop, staring at the city lights beyond her window. Somewhere out there, Ethan was smiling for cameras, and Lena was standing beside him, blissfully unaware that she was about to inherit a nightmare. Amara whispered into the quiet. "Let's see how long the truth takes to find you. If you uncovered the truth behind someone who betrayed you, would you expose it immediately or wait until the moment it hurt them most? Tell me in the comments. What would you do?" Sleep eluded Amara that night. The glow of her laptop painted faint blue shadows across the apartment walls. Every file she opened was another thread in a web of deceit, each document whispering Ethan's hunger for power. Invoices for shell companies. Emails between lawyers arranging silent transfers. Her name forged across approvals she'd never seen. He'd spent months preparing this. The realization cut deeper than betrayal. It was orchestration. Every argument, every "you need a break," every late-night board call, all of it had been moving her off the chessboard. She poured another cup of cold coffee and leaned back, exhaustion burning through her chest. "You think you can erase me," she murmured. "You built your empire on my blueprint." She copied the evidence onto an encrypted drive, tucked it into a plain envelope, and wrote one word on it: insurance. Then she whispered to the empty room, "I'm done surviving you. Now I start remembering me." At Blake Innovations, the following morning felt like the aftermath of a thunderstorm that hadn't yet cleared. Lena walked through the hallways under a haze of whispers. The marketing department paused conversations when she entered. Assistants exchanged nervous glances. The air carried that sharp, metallic scent of gossip. On her desk waited a single white envelope. No name, no stamp, just placed there. Inside, a photograph. Ethan, standing close to another woman outside a downtown hotel. The date on the timestamp was from last week. Her pulse quickened. She flipped the photo over, blank except for one handwritten line. "You're not the first. You won't be the last." Her mouth went dry. She shoved it into her drawer just as Ethan appeared in the doorway. "You look pale," he said lightly, walking in. "Too much caffeine?" "Long night," she replied, forcing steadiness. He smiled the way predators do before they feed. Get used to long nights. The product demo is in 3 days. Lena nodded, fingers trembling beneath the desk. When he left, she exhaled shakily, staring at her reflection in the dark screen of her laptop. She didn't recognize the woman looking back, her lipstick too precise, her eyes too tired. Maybe Amara had once looked like this. Amara spent the day visiting an old friend, Dean Rivers, a venture capitalist who had once courted investment in Blake Innovations before Ethan shut him out. Dean greeted her with cautious surprise. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he said, motioning for her to sit. "Heard Ethan pulled a coup." Amara smirked faintly. "That's one word for it. What do you need from me?" "Information," she said, sliding a USB drive across the table. "Off record. I want to know who's funding his new expansion." Dean raised a brow. "You planning revenge?" She met his gaze. "No, just insurance. He's laundering money through shell investors. And if the SEC gets even a hint." Dean whistled softly. "You really think he's that reckless?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You always were the smarter one, Amara. I'll dig." When she left the cafe, rain was falling again. She didn't bother with an umbrella. Let wash the bitterness off her skin. Back at the company, Lena stood outside Ethan's office as voices rose inside. "You can't hide this forever," Ethan, the IT head, said. "The code logs prove Amara's authorship. You're exposing the entire firm." Ethan's reply was a hiss. "Then purge the logs. Every last byte. That's illegal. I pay you to obey, not to think." Lena stepped back before they could see her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to run, to pack her things and vanish, but the image of Amara's face from the press photos haunted her. The dignity, the quiet fire. Maybe she owed the woman more than guilt. That night, she searched the internal archives. Buried deep in a forgotten folder, she found project files still tagged with Amara's initials. She copied them to a flash drive, heart racing. If Ethan found out, he'd destroy her career. Maybe worse. But something inside her refused to keep pretending. Amara sat by her window later that evening, watching lightning fracture the horizon. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A soft, shaking voice came through. "Amara Blake?" "Yes." "This is Lena." Silence. Amara didn't speak, letting the name settle in the air like dust. "I know you have every reason to hate me," Lena said quickly, voice trembling. "But you need to listen. He's doing something illegal, and he's making it look like you were involved." Amara's pulse steadied. "You just found out? I saw the files. I copied them. And why are you telling me?" Another pause. Then, quietly, "Because I think he's going to ruin both of us." Amara exhaled slowly, the sound half laughter, half disbelief. "Welcome to the club." Lena's breath hitched. "I didn't know what I was walking into." "No one ever does," Amara said softly. "But if you're serious, meet me tomorrow. 7 p.m. The old Verve Cafe. I'll be there." When the call ended, Amara leaned back, eyes closing. For the first time in weeks, the anger didn't feel like poison. It felt like clarity. Ethan's empire was beginning to crack, and the first fracture had come from within. Would you trust someone who helped destroy your life if they came back asking for alliance? Or would you walk away? Share what you'd do in that moment. The next evening, the rain had turned into mist, fine enough to coat the city in silver, soft enough to hide tears if anyone cared to shed them. Amara arrived at Verve Cafe 5 minutes early. She didn't plan it that way. Old instincts simply made her punctual. She sat in the same corner booth where she'd once drawn a company's future on a napkin, now stained and forgotten somewhere in a drawer. The smell of espresso and nostalgia filled the air. She folded her hands together and waited. When Lena appeared, she looked smaller than her photos, her confidence replaced by exhaustion, the sharpness in her eyes dulled to worry. The girl's umbrella dripped, rain onto the floor as she hesitated by the door, searching for courage. Amara gestured to the empty seat. "You came." Lena nodded, sliding in across from her. "I didn't think you'd actually agree to meet." Amara stirred her coffee. Curiosity's stronger than hatred. Silence stretched between them, brittle and charged. Then Lena whispered, "He's changing contracts, Amara. Moving assets. He said something about offshore holdings, about making sure no one can trace the origins." "I think he means you." Amara's jaw tightened. "He's been planning this for months. Maybe years." Lena swallowed hard. "I didn't know." "I believe you," Amara said simply. Lena blinked in surprise. "Why?" "Because you sound like I used to." That silenced them both. For a moment, the only sound was the soft rain tapping the window. Lena's hands trembled on the table, knuckles pale. "I have copies of the files," she said, "but I don't know what to do. If he finds out, he'll destroy me." "He already is," Amara said gently. "He's just polite about it for now." Lena's eyes filled. "Why didn't you fight him sooner?" Amara smiled faintly, the kind that never reached the eyes. "Because I loved him. And because love makes you believe cruelty is just a misunderstanding." Lena looked away. "I thought he loved me." Amara's gaze softened. "He loves control. It just wears different faces." The words landed like quiet thunder. Lena nodded slowly, tears threatening. "Then what do we do?" "We wait," Amara said. "We watch. And when he thinks we're broken, we strike." Back at the penthouse that night, Ethan poured himself another drink, watching the city lights flicker below. The reflection in the glass showed a man who looked powerful, too powerful to fall. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "They met tonight. Verve Cafe. Thought you should know." He smiled without warmth. "So," he muttered, "the prodigal wife and the new pet are bonding." He deleted the message and refilled his glass. He wasn't worried. Amara was brilliant, yes, but predictable. She'd react with emotion, not precision, or so he believed. He didn't realize emotion, in the right hands, could become a weapon. Lena didn't sleep after the meeting. She returned to her apartment, closed the curtains, and turned on every light as if brightness could ward off guilt. Her laptop sat open on a coffee table, the flash drive inserted. On the screen, lines of data scrolled by. Transactions, falsified signatures, email trails. She whispered, "God, what have I done?" She thought of Amara, her composure, the quiet sadness behind her strength, and felt something like shame twist in her chest. Maybe redemption didn't come with apologies. Maybe it came with action. She began cataloging the evidence into folders labeled truth. Amara, meanwhile, drove to her old office building long after midnight. She parked across the street, engine off, headlights dimmed. The tower loomed above her like a ghost of everything she'd lost. Through the glass facade, she could see cleaners moving, security guards pacing. But what caught her attention was Ethan's silhouette in his office window, still there at 1 a.m., pacing, phone pressed to his ear. He was worried. That gave her power. She pulled out her phone and opened a secure chat with the anonymous insider. "Amara, did you tell him about the cafe?" "Anonymous, no. But someone else might have. Watch your back." She exhaled slowly, pulse rising. Her instinct screamed that Ethan was closing in, that he'd begin retaliating soon. She needed to stay ahead. She glanced once more at his distant shape behind the glass and whispered, "You're running out of lies, Ethan." The next morning, she woke to a knock on her apartment door. When she opened it, 2 men in dark suits stood there. One held an envelope. "Mrs. Blake." "Ex-Mrs. Blake," she corrected. The man handed her the envelope. "You've been served." She tore it open. Defamation notice. Ethan was suing her for publicly spreading false allegations damaging to company reputation. Amara laughed under her breath, disbelief mixing with fury. He really thinks fear still works. She called Mia. "Give me my lawyer. We're going to court sooner than expected." At the same hour, Lena arrived at work to find her company badge disabled. The turnstile beeped red each time she tried. Security approached. "Sorry, Miss Torres. Mr. Blake said your credentials were under review." Her chest tightened. "Under review? What?" "I don't know, ma'am." She turned to see Ethan stepping out of the elevator, his expression smooth and unreadable. "Lena," he said calmly, "a word in my office." Her voice shook. "You locked me out?" "Standard security audit," he replied, hand on her shoulder as if to guide her. "Come on, don't make a scene." The phrase jolted through her. Don't make a scene. The same words he'd once used on Amara. Something inside her snapped, quiet but decisive. She stepped back. "If this is an audit, you won't mind if I bring my lawyer." His jaw stiffened. "Careful, Lena." She met his eyes. "No, you be careful." She turned and walked away before her courage dissolved, before the fear could reclaim her spine. That evening, Amara received an encrypted email from an unknown sender. "He's preparing to transfer company assets offshore by Friday. If you want proof, meet me at the old warehouse on 7th Street tomorrow night. Come alone." She stared at the message for a long time. The sender ID was masked, but the phrasing, the caution, felt familiar. "Lena." Amara closed the laptop, mind racing. This could be the opening she needed, or a trap. Either way, she couldn't turn back now. If you were Amara, would you risk walking into that meeting alone, or trust no one at all? Comment below. Your answer says a lot about the kind of fighter you are. The warehouse on 7th Street had been abandoned for years, its broken windows catching the weak light of passing cars. Amara parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, boots crunching over damp gravel. The air smelled of rust and rain. Her heart thudded a steady rhythm, fear measured against purpose. She had packed nothing but her phone and the small flash drive that held her insurance. When she pushed the metal door open, the hinges groaned. A single overhead bulb flickered, throwing long shadows across the floor. "Lena," she called softly. For a moment, there was nothing but the drip of rain leaking through the roof. Then footsteps echoed. Lena emerged from the darkness, hood pulled up, clutching a manila envelope. "You came." Amara nodded. "You said you had proof." Lena's hands shook as she extended the envelope. "Bank statements. Wire transfers to shell accounts in the Caymans. It's him, Amara. He's moving company money into personal funds." Amara took the envelope, flipping through the pages. The numbers swam before her eyes. Millions, all disguised as research funding. "How did you get this?" Lena hesitated. One of the finance officers, Ethan's old friend, was bragging about it after hours. "I pretended I didn't understand. Then I copied the drive from his computer when he left. That was risky. I owed you something." Amara looked up, studying her. "You didn't owe me, Lena. You owed yourself the truth." The words hit Lena harder than any reprimand could have. They stood in silence for a while, the sound of distant thunder filling the space between them. Then Amara said quietly, "If we take this to the authorities, he'll know it came from inside. He'll destroy you." "I don't care anymore." "Yes, you do," Amara said gently. "Caring doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Lena's eyes glistened. "And you? Do you still care about it?" Amara's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Not about him. About justice." A sharp noise snapped through the silence, metal scraping against concrete. Both women froze. "Did you tell anyone you were meeting me?" Amara whispered. Lena shook her head. "No, I swear." Another sound followed, footsteps, deliberate and slow, coming from the shadows behind the old machinery. A voice cut through the darkness. "You really should have stayed quiet, Amara." Ethan stepped into the light, immaculate in a black coat, the faintest smirk curling his mouth. 2 men flanked him, security from the company. Lena gasped. "Ethan, how?" He raised an eyebrow. "You didn't think I'd notice my files walking out the door? I built this empire on surveillance, darling." Amara's grip tightened on the envelope. "You built it on lies." He chuckled. "Semantics. What do you want?" she asked, voice low. "To remind you both who controls the narrative." He nodded toward the guards. Take the documents. Lena instinctively stepped back, but Amara moved first, shoving the envelope behind her. You touch this, and the story breaks tonight. Every major outlet has a timed release from my cloud server. You arrest me, it goes public. Ethan's smile faltered. You're bluffing. Try me. The tension coiled thick as wire. One of the guards hesitated, glancing at the other. Ethan's jaw tightened. He gestured for them to wait. You don't want to do this, he said finally, his voice softening. Amara, think. You'll ruin everything we built. We didn't build it, she said. I did. You just put your name on it. He took a slow step closer. I made you relevant. She met his eyes. No, you made me invisible. There's a difference. Lena watched, heart hammering. Something shifted inside her, fear curdling into fury. She stepped forward, voice trembling but loud. Stop pretending this is business, Ethan. You destroyed people because you could. He turned on her, eyes flashing. You think you're innocent? You wanted power. I just gave you the stage. Lena flinched as if struck. Amara's voice sliced through the air. Leave her out of this. Your fight is with me. Oh, it's with both of you now, he hissed. You think anyone will believe you over me? I've already painted you as unstable. A bitter ex-wife. A jealous protege. You'll be noise. Nothing more. For a heartbeat, Amara almost laughed. Then why are you here, Ethan, if I'm nothing? He said nothing. His silence was answer enough. Outside, thunder cracked. Rain began to pound the roof in a steady roar. Amara took a breath and held his gaze. You know what I realized standing in that boardroom? You're terrified of me. You always were. That's why you needed to own me, to mute me. Because you knew one day I'd wake up and stop being afraid. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his facade cracking. You're delusional. Maybe, she said softly, but I'm the kind of delusion that ruins empires. She turned to Lena. Go. Now. Lena hesitated. What about you? I'll be fine. Lena ran. One of the guards moved to follow, but Amara stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Let her go, she warned, or this ends badly for everyone. The guard hesitated, uncertain. Ethan's shout cut through the noise. Let her go. She's not worth the cleanup. Lena disappeared through the side door into the rain. Amara faced Ethan one last time. You'll fall, Ethan. Maybe not tonight, but soon. And when you do, I'll be standing where you left me at the beginning. He stepped closer, fury barely contained. You walk out that door, Amara, and I'll make sure you never work again. She smiled faintly. You already did that. And I survived. She turned and walked into the rain, the envelope pressed tight to her chest. Behind her, Ethan's voice echoed through the warehouse, raw and unhinged. You think this is over? Her reply drifted back through the storm. It just started. When someone tries to take credit for what you built, do you fight them head on or let time expose the truth? I'd love to know which path you take. Morning came gray and heavy, a sky the color of bruised steel. Amara sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by folders, coffee cups, and the unopened defamation notice. The smell of rain still lingered from the night before. She had slept only an hour. The knock came precisely at 8. When she opened the door, Lena stood there, hair damp, eyes hollow. He fired me, she said before Amara could speak. Security escorted me out. I don't even have access to my email. Amara sighed. I warned you he'd retaliate. I know, Lena whispered. That's why I came. For a moment, neither woman moved. Then Amara stepped aside. Come in. You might as well join the disaster you helped start. Lena entered quietly, glancing around the small apartment. The simplicity of it surprised her. No luxury, no trace of the empire Amara had built. Only a stack of documents, a worn sofa, and determination in the air. I didn't know where else to go, Lena admitted. He's angry, Amara. Not just angry, terrified. I think he's realized you have proof. Amara nodded slowly. Good. Fear keeps him human. They sat opposite each other at the table. Rain ticked softly against the window. What's the plan? Lena asked. Legally, I can't confront him directly yet, Amara said. But he's suing me. That gives us discovery rights. If we can stall his motion, we buy time to collect evidence. You still have a drive? Lena pulled it from her coat pocket. Everything's on here. Then we need to make sure it survives whatever he throws at us. Lena hesitated. Amara, why are you helping me? After everything I did, Amara met her eyes. Because you're the only one telling the truth. And because you remind me of who I was before I forgot what loyalty costs. Something in Lena's chest cracked, guilt turning into respect. They spent hours cross-referencing files. Amara moved through data with precision, fingers tapping across the keyboard in rhythm. Lena watched her, realizing this was what real brilliance looked like, quiet, methodical, unstoppable. By afternoon, the apartment was covered in printouts. Amara circled patterns with red ink, muttering dates and transaction codes. Here, she said suddenly. This account, Sun Meridian Holdings. It connects to 3 of the fake research grants Ethan approved. The signatures are all identical copies. Lena leaned closer. If we show this to the auditors, he'll claim we fabricated it. Amara cut in. We need corroboration from inside. Lena frowned. Everyone's terrified of him. Not everyone, Amara said. There's one person who still owes me a favor. She picked up her phone and dialed. Mia, I need you to leak an internal memo to the press. No details, just that a financial review is coming. Anonymous source. Make it sound credible. Lena blinked. You're going to bait him. Amara's smile was thin. He's impulsive when cornered. The more he panics, the more mistakes he makes. By evening, the story had broken. Blake Innovations under unscheduled financial audit. Ethan's phone exploded with calls. In the penthouse, he hurled a glass against the wall. She's bluffing, he snapped into the phone. Shut it down. But he wasn't sure. His lawyers sounded hesitant. Investors wanted reassurance. For the first time, control felt slippery. He slammed the phone down and stared out at the skyline. Somewhere out there, Amara was smiling. Meanwhile, Amara's living room had turned into a war room. Laptop screens glowed, files scattered like battle plans. Lena paced nervously. He's going to come after you harder now, she said. I know. And you're not afraid? Amara paused, looking at her. Of course I'm afraid. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Lena. It's what you do while you're shaking. Lena stopped pacing. You really think we can beat him? I don't think, Amara replied. I plan. They exchanged a look, part challenge, part understanding. The alliance, fragile as glass, had begun to solidify. Late that night, Lena dozed on the couch while Amara continued working. The faint hum of the laptop filled the room. She paused occasionally to glance at the younger woman sleeping, guilt and empathy blending into something unfamiliar, something close to protectiveness. She thought of the first time she'd met Ethan, how she'd mistaken his confidence for strength, his ambition for love. Now she saw the same wound in Lena's trust. Quietly, she whispered, "You'll survive him too." She didn't notice the message that appeared on her screen at that exact moment. Anonymous, you're not safe. They're tracking your IP. He's coming. Amara froze. Her pulse spiked. She woke Lena with a sharp whisper. Get up. Lena blinked, disoriented. What? Pack everything. Now. Within minutes, they were in Amara's car, laptop and files stuffed into a backpack. The night was eerily still, city lights smearing across wet pavement. Where are we going? Lena asked. To someone who can help us disappear for a while. Disappear? Amara nodded. Until we decide how to reappear with evidence. They drove south until the skyline vanished. The city became a blur of highway lights and rain. Lena stared out the window, fear gnawing at her. What if he finds us? Amara's hands gripped the wheel tighter. Then he'll learn what it feels like to be hunted. Lena turned toward her. You're not doing this just for revenge, are you? Amara didn't answer immediately. No, I'm doing it so that no woman who builds something ever has to watch it stolen again. Silence settled between them. a shared vow neither had expected to make. When they finally pulled into a small, coastal motel hours later, exhaustion hit them both. They checked in under false names. The clerk barely looked up. Inside the room, Lena sat on the edge of the bed, hugging her knees. "I can't believe this is real." Amara handed her a cup of coffee from the machine. "It's real, but so is redemption." Lena met her gaze. "Do you ever think about forgiving him?" Amara considered it. "Forgiveness is mercy. He hasn't earned that. But I'll forgive myself for trusting him." "That's enough." Lena nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Outside, waves crashed against the shore, rhythmic and relentless. Inside, the two women, once enemies, began sketching their plan for the morning. Not allies by choice, allies by survival. When life forces you beside someone who once hurt you, do you keep your guard up or open the door to trust again? Tell me where your heart lands. The morning after their flight to the coast, the world outside the motel window was awash in silver. A gull drifted across the horizon, its cry the only sound beyond the surf. Amara stood by the window, one hand wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Lena stirred awake on the second bed, hair mussed, laptop still open beside her. "What time is it?" "Almost 7, Amara murmured. Lena sat up, blinking. "You didn't sleep?" Amara gave a small shrug. "Sleep feels like a luxury lately." A knock startled them both. Amara set down her mug and motioned for Lena to stay back. When she opened the door, the man standing there smiled, rain dripping from the collar of a leather jacket. "Still a morning person," he said softly. For a heartbeat, Amara couldn't breathe. "Daniel?" He looked older than the last time she'd seen him. More lines at the corners of his eyes, more steadiness in his posture. But the kindness in his face hadn't changed. "It's been a while," he said. "May I come in?" Lena looked from one to the other, uncertain. Amara stepped aside. "How did you find me?" Daniel held up his phone. "Mia called. Said you were in trouble again. She thought you might actually listen to someone you don't pay." Amara gave a quiet laugh that almost broke into a sob. "You drove all the way here?" "For hours," he said. "I figure that's what friends are for." The word friends landed somewhere deep inside her, a place she hadn't visited in years. They sat at the small table while Lena showered, Daniel's presence filling the cramped room with a calm Amara hadn't realized she'd been craving. He gestured toward the stacks of papers. "So, this is what you've been doing instead of answering my emails?" "I had to disappear," she said. "I noticed." His tone stayed gentle, but there was a trace of hurt in it. "You could have called Amara. You always carry the world alone." She stared at the rising steam from her coffee. "If I called, I'd have to admit I failed." Daniel leaned forward. "Failing isn't falling, Mara. It's stopping that makes it final." The nickname, Mara, slipped out naturally the way it used to during university nights filled with cheap takeout and dreams that still felt reachable. The sound of it softened her shoulders. Lena emerged from the bathroom, towel around her neck. "I didn't know we were expecting company." "Daniel Carter," he said, standing. "Old friend." "Lena Torres," she replied, shaking his hand. "New mess." He smiled. "You look like you both could use breakfast." Amara rolled her eyes. "You always think food solves everything." "Not everything," he said, eyes catching hers for half a second longer than necessary. "But it's a start." They drove to a diner near the pier, the kind with cracked leather booths and salt on the tables. The waitress recognized Daniel. He'd been coming here for years while writing for the Coastal Review, a local investigative journal. "So you're still chasing stories," Amara said as they waited for their food. "And you're still avoiding them," he teased lightly. Lena watched their exchange quietly, seeing something she hadn't seen in Amara before: ease. Daniel flipped open a worn notebook. "Tell me everything from the top. Ethan Blake, offshore accounts, the lawsuit. If half of what you're hinting at is true, this isn't just a domestic squabble. It's corporate fraud on a massive scale." Amara hesitated. "You'd print it, if I can prove it." "You know me, I don't run gossip." "I'm not asking you to expose him yet," she said. "I just need leverage." Daniel leaned back. Then let me help you find it. The offer carried weight. Amara felt the part of herself that had been braced for battle start to loosen. Lena leaned forward. Why would you risk it? Ethan has lawyers who eat reporters alive. Daniel shrugged. Because I've seen what he's done to her. And because I believe the truth deserves louder voices. Amara met his gaze. There was no pity there, only quiet conviction. She realized how long it had been since anyone had looked at her that way. Outside, sunlight broke through the fog, turning the ocean into liquid gold. For the first time in weeks, Amara allowed herself a breath that didn't hurt. Do you think trust can ever be rebuilt after years of silence? Tell me below, what made you trust again after losing it? By the time the waitress refilled their coffee, the outlines of a plan had begun to form between them. Half legal, half survival. Lena spread files across the table, while Daniel took notes in his weather-worn book. The sight of the two of them working side by side struck Amara with a strange mix of pride and disbelief. We leaked just enough to rattle him, Daniel said, something that forces him to react publicly. Then, when he lies, we bring proof. Lena frowned. That's dangerous. He'll know we're coordinating. Daniel's pen paused. He already suspects. The trick is to make him think he still holds the upper hand. Amara watched him as he spoke, the way his brow furrowed, the quiet patience that steadied his voice. He had always been like that, methodical, grounded. When she'd been chasing venture capital and promises, he'd been writing about ethics and endurance. She once called him boring. Now that steadiness felt like safety. She took a sip of coffee. You haven't changed. He smiled. I take that as a compliment this time. It is. Their eyes held a second too long before Lena cleared her throat. So the bait. Amara looked back down at the documents. There's a dormant patent registration that Ethan forgot to renew. Project Nemesis. If we publish an article suggesting it contains the company's core algorithm, he'll panic. Daniel nodded slowly. Because it does. Amara's lips curved. Exactly. Lena bit her lip. That'll make him come after us. That's the point, Amara said. We want him in motion. The faster he moves, the sloppier he gets. They left the diner with a sense of direction that felt almost like relief. The sun had broken fully through the clouds, scattering gold across the wet pavement. Daniel walked between them, hands in his jacket pockets. You two should lay low tonight, he said. I can file the first teaser anonymously. Let me handle the media. Amara stopped beside his car. Daniel, I can't ask you. You didn't ask, he interrupted gently. I offered. She looked at him for a moment, the words catching somewhere in her throat. Gratitude wasn't something she'd felt safe expressing lately. It required trust, and trust meant vulnerability. But Daniel's presence felt like standing on solid ground after months of running on ice. Thank you, she managed. He smiled. Just promise you'll stay alive long enough to see him fall. Deal. Lena climbed into the back seat, watching them through the reflection in the glass. The way Amara relaxed around him was subtle but undeniable, her voice softer, her shoulders less guarded. It made Lena wonder what it must be like to have someone who remembered you before the damage. That evening, back at the motel, Amara sat on the bed reading the first draft Daniel had sent. Unverified reports suggest irregularities in Blake Innovations' intellectual property filings, sources close to the company say. It was cautious, factual, anonymous, but it was enough to plant the seed. Lena sat across from her, twisting a strand of hair nervously. Do you think he'll take the bait? Amara closed the laptop. He already has. Ethan's ego can't stand uncertainty. Right on cue, Amara's phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. Nice try, Mara. You just declared war. She exhaled slowly, then typed back one word. Finally. Daniel called moments later. He's reacting. PR team's denying everything, which means they're rattled. You did it. Amara allowed herself a faint laugh. We did it. His voice softened. You sound lighter. Maybe I finally remember what it feels like to breathe. There was a pause, one of those long, fragile silences where words could tip the balance, either toward confession or retreat. "I missed hearing your voice like this," Daniel said quietly. Amara felt the warmth rise to her cheeks before she could stop it. "Careful, journalist. I might start trusting you again." "That's the idea," he said, half smiling through the phone. Later, while Lena slept, Amara stepped outside onto the balcony. The ocean stretched dark and endless, the air sharp with salt. She wrapped her arms around herself and thought about Daniel, about the way he'd looked at her without judgment, about the version of herself she'd been when they first met. Back then she believed ambition could protect her from heartbreak. Now she knew better. What protected you wasn't walls. It was people who refused to let you vanish behind them. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Daniel. "Lock the door and try to get some rest. Tomorrow we start rewriting the story." She smiled, the smallest upward curve, but it felt like sunrise after a long winter. Miles away, Ethan stood in his office, staring at the article glowing on his monitor. His jaw clenched. "You think you can humiliate me?" he muttered. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." He dialed a number. "Find where she's hiding. Tonight." The line clicked. The hunt had begun again. And for the first time, Amara wouldn't be running alone. When someone from your past suddenly re-enters your life, do you guard your heart or let them prove they've changed? Comment below. What would you do if you were Amara? Morning light crept across the motel floor, turning stacks of paper into pale islands. Amara woke to the scent of instant coffee and the low hum of a laptop. Daniel was already working, his notes spread with a precision that mirrored hers. He had traced Ethan's web of shell companies through 3 countries overnight. Each link led to another alias, another false signature. What stunned him most wasn't the scale of theft, but the deliberate way Ethan had removed Amara's name from every patent. The erasure was meticulous, an artist of deceit copying over a masterpiece. When she stirred, he passed her a printout. "This is what he used to take you down," he said simply. She studied the pages in silence, her throat tight. It wasn't the numbers that hurt, it was the handwriting. She recognized Ethan's signature beside hers on a document that once symbolized love, now rewritten as ownership. The betrayal ran deeper than money. It was history rewritten by the one person who had shared it. Lena joined them later, eyes swollen from sleep. They ate breakfast in fragments of quiet. Outside, seagulls screamed above the surf. By noon, Daniel had pieced together enough evidence to form a timeline. The marriage, the expansion, the manipulation. Each milestone of Amara's success had been used as camouflage for Ethan's greed. As Daniel read the final summary aloud, Amara's mind drifted backward to the beginning. She remembered their first apartment, the cracked tiles, the nights when code and caffeine built the skeleton of a dream. Ethan had been charming then, always convincing her that success required sacrifice, always promising that the world would remember them together. She hadn't noticed the subtle recalibration. His ideas became their victories. Her breakthroughs became his presentations. The memory darkened. A night when she'd caught him editing her slides before a board meeting, removing her name from the invention tag. She'd laughed then, thought it was an oversight. The way he'd smiled, too calm, too sure, had told her otherwise. Back in the present, Daniel's voice cut through her thoughts. "You were never unstable, Amara." He made it look that way. She met his eyes and saw no pity, only fury held in check. Something inside her steadied. "Then we ended properly," she said. They spent the rest of the day encrypting files and drafting statements. Daniel contacted 2 investigative journalists he trusted. Lena combed through financial ledgers, isolating the proof that tied Ethan directly to the offshore accounts. For the first time, their work felt less like survival and more like justice in motion. When evening came, Daniel suggested a walk along the shore. Amara hesitated but followed. The tide was low. Wet sand reflected the orange sky like glass. They walked without words, their footsteps parallel but never touching. He finally spoke. "You could still leave this behind, start over somewhere new." "I did once," she said quietly. "But when someone steals your story, leaving means letting them write the ending." He nodded, understanding. The wind tugged at her hair. "Then I'll help you take it back." The simplicity of his promise broke something loose in her chest. She looked out at the endless water and felt, for the first time, a calm that wasn't resignation. When someone rewrites your story, do you fight to reclaim it or start fresh? Tell me which choice feels truer to you. Night closed over the coast, and the sound of waves mixed with the faint clicking of laptop keys. Daniel uncovered the final strand of deceit. Ethan hadn't just stolen Amara's algorithms. He had built them atop something darker. The initial capital for Blake Innovations had come from Amara's late father's research trust, money Ethan had quietly redirected years earlier. Amara read the bank statements twice, the truth cutting cleanly. Her father's work had funded everything Ethan later claimed as his own. It was theft braided with betrayal. For hours she said nothing. Then, at dawn, she stood outside watching gulls circle above the surf. The grief was too old for tears. What remained was resolve. Daniel watched from the doorway, understanding that this silence was the beginning of war. Days blurred into a rhythm of preparation. The small motel room turned into headquarters. Lists on the wall, timelines, evidence, backups. Lena handled logistics. Daniel managed the press. Amara directed everything with surgical calm. Working together softened the edges between them. Lena's guilt began to turn into respect. Daniel's steady presence became the quiet center that held Amara together. He never pushed, never demanded. When exhaustion overtook her, he simply brought coffee and let the silence breathe. One afternoon, while rain drummed against the roof, Daniel shared an old photo he had found. The three of them at a university science fair. Amara with soldering wires tangled in her hands, him beside her, sunlight catching his grin. It reminded her of a version of herself unscarred by ambition. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I was just waiting for you to remember who you were." That night, she couldn't sleep. She stood at the balcony, feeling the warmth of that memory settle inside her like a small light. For the first time since everything collapsed, she didn't feel alone. The next morning, the story broke. Daniel's anonymous expose went live, supported by documents leaked to international media. Within hours, headlines screamed of fraud, offshore accounts, and the dethroning of a tech icon. Ethan reacted with fury. He held a press conference claiming innocence and painting Amara as a vengeful ex-wife aided by a disgruntled employee and an unethical journalist. The words hit their mark. Public opinion split. Online vitriol surged. Then came the counterattack. Someone hacked Amara's cloud storage and dumped partial files online, edited to frame her as complicit. Within minutes, her phone erupted with messages from reporters demanding comment. Lena panicked. "He's turning it all around." Amara closed her laptop. Let him. Truth outlives noise. But inside she felt the old wound reopen. That evening, as Daniel went to meet a source, Ethan's men found them. 2 cars boxed Daniel's vehicle near the pier. Masked figures grabbed his bag and drove off. He was left bruised but alive, the stolen drive containing key evidence. When he returned to the motel, blood on his sleeve, Amara's calm finally cracked. The sight of him hurt, her one solid thing, shaken. She cleaned the cut on his cheek in silence. Their eyes met and held. The air between them trembled with everything unsaid. "He won't stop," Daniel whispered. "Neither will I," she replied. The next days were chaos. Ethan's legal team filed injunctions. Investors demanded statements. The world watched 2 versions of the same story unfold. Amara faced a decision: reveal everything, including evidence that implicated her past oversight, or protect herself and let Ethan slip through again. To confess would risk her career, but to hide would betray everyone who believed her. She spent the night alone on the beach, wind tearing through her hair, salt on her lips. She remembered her father's words from long ago. Integrity isn't what you keep, it's what you refuse to sell. At sunrise, she made her choice. When Daniel woke, she was already on the phone with regulators, surrendering all remaining documents, including those that revealed her unintentional signatures on Ethan's forged transfers. The confession would cost her reputation, but it would end him. Daniel watched her, pride and fear mingling. "You're burning the bridge behind you," he said. "Good," she answered. "No more retreat." The statement she released later that day was concise and devastating. "I take responsibility for the company I helped create and the corruption I failed to see. But truth matters more than image. I stand by the evidence." The internet erupted again, this time differently. Her honesty disarmed cynicism. Sympathy replaced mockery. Investors withdrew from Ethan's control. Weeks later, the courtroom buzzed with cameras and whispers. Ethan Blake sat at the defendant's table, polished but cornered. The prosecution laid out the trail Daniel and Lena had built: money laundering, forgery, corporate theft. Amara testified last. Her voice never trembled. She described how love had blinded her to deceit, how silence had become complicity, and how she'd finally chosen truth over comfort. When she stepped down, Ethan tried to meet her gaze. She didn't look back. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on multiple counts. He was led away, jaw clenched, the empire he'd stolen crumbling in the space of a gavel's echo. Outside, flashbulbs flared. Reporters shouted her name, but Amara walked past them into the brightness of a winter morning. Lena waited on the courthouse steps. Daniel stood beside her. "It's over," Lena said, relief breaking into tears. Amara looked up at the sky. "No," she said softly. "It's beginning." They spent that evening by the water where it had all started. The horizon burned orange as the sun dropped into the sea. Lena spoke of new job offers, of learning to forgive herself. Daniel listened quietly, his hand brushing Amara's only once, brief but electric. He turned to her. "You could rebuild from here, with what you have, with who you are." She smiled, eyes reflecting the fading light. "Maybe not rebuild, maybe begin again." He nodded, and for the first time the future didn't feel like a burden. It felt open. When your truth finally wins, do you rebuild the old dream or create a new one? Tell me which path you choose and why. The first spring after the trial arrived timidly, as if afraid to touch the ruins Ethan had left behind. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. Even the sea seemed quieter, exhausted from witnessing too much. Amara rented a small studio overlooking the water, a single room with wide windows and a desk that faced the horizon. Every morning she woke before dawn, brewed dark coffee, and watched the tide roll in. It became her meditation, to remember that everything, success, pain, betrayal, ebbed and returned in its own time. She had once measured life in contracts and code. Now she measured it in breaths. At first, rebuilding felt impossible. Her inbox overflowed with speaking requests, investment offers, opportunistic apologies. She deleted them all. What she wanted couldn't be bought or applauded. She wanted quiet competence again, the feeling of creating something honest. She began sketching ideas on the back of grocery receipts, open source systems that allowed small inventors to share designs safely, algorithms that rewarded transparency instead of secrecy. It was slow work, but it made sense of her days. The first person she hired was Lena. They worked side by side at the kitchen table, laughing over half-burned toast and old playlists. The guilt that had once kept them apart turned into something gentler, a mutual guardianship of lessons learned. When they disagreed, they argued fiercely but never cruelly. Each saw in the other the reflection of who she might have become without courage. Amara also volunteered at a local community college, teaching a short course on ethical entrepreneurship. Standing in front of those bright, uncertain faces, she realized she wasn't teaching code. She was teaching the anatomy of mistakes. She spoke of ownership, of the danger of letting someone else define your worth. The students listened the way she used to listen to her father, intent, believing. Daniel visited on weekends. He never came empty-handed. Sometimes groceries, sometimes a dog-eared book, once a potted fern that she promptly named Justice. He'd sit by the window reading while she worked, occasionally asking questions about her prototypes. His silence was a comfort. It asked for nothing. One rainy afternoon, Amara's old mentor called. "They're offering you a position on the National Ethics Board," he said. "They need someone who's lived it, not just studied it." She almost refused. Then she thought of the boardrooms where her voice had been erased and realized this was the opposite of erasure. "I'll do it," she said. That night she celebrated with Lena and Daniel at a small cafe on the pier. Candlelight flickered across their faces. The sea beyond the glass was dark and endless. For a moment she allowed herself to feel proud, not for the vindication, but for having walked through the fire without becoming it. When they left, Daniel offered his jacket against the cold. "You know," he said, "you've been building something bigger than a company." "What's that?" "A way back to yourself." She looked at him, the reflection of streetlights glinting in his eyes. "Then maybe I'll finally recognize her." They walked home without speaking further, footsteps in rhythm, the silence between them tender rather than heavy. A year later, Amara stood on the stage of the Global Tech Summit, lights blinding and warm. The crowd wasn't the enemy she once feared. It was a sea of faces hungry for truth. She spoke of transparency, of rebuilding, of how power is safest in open hands. Every word felt like returning a stolen piece of herself. When a standing ovation came, it was thunderous but kind. Backstage, Daniel waited with his ever-present notebook and an expression that said he'd never doubted her. Their hands found each other as naturally as breathing. That night, walking through the city, she told him, "For years I thought success was applause. Turns out it's peace." "And love?" he asked. She smiled. "That too, maybe." Summer opened like a window. Alethea Labs launched its first public tool, a transparent innovation platform free to use, funded by a network of ethical investors. Messages of gratitude poured in. The company turned profitable within months, but money was no longer the measure. At the celebration, Lena handed Amara the same pendant engraved "Begin" and laughed. "I figured you'd need a reminder." Amara wore it that night as she and Daniel stood on the pier, the horizon melting into gold. "What now?" he asked. "Now we live," she said. "No secrets, no scripts, just the work, the ocean, and maybe a little happiness." He kissed her then, soft and certain, the kind that rewrites endings. The tide came in, washing over their shoes, cool and steady. The sea carrying away the last traces of what had been broken. For the first time in years, Amara felt whole. Not because she had rebuilt the empire, but because she no longer needed one. When you finally rise from the ashes of something you once thought defined you, what's the first thing you build? Your dream, your heart, or your peace? Share what your own rebirth would look like.
They eat by candlelight, laughter mixing with the hum of the city. When you've been betrayed and finally rebuild your peace, do you believe forgiveness is strength, or just the quiet ending we all deserve? Tell me below.